All right, let's answer some audience questions. These are questions that come in maybe via email, maybe via voicemail, or Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, our Reddit discussion forum. We'll take them in all forms. First question is from Carson saying, are votes legitimate or worth anything if a big portion of the electorate doesn't vote? I'm going to interpret it as, are election results legitimate? I think that's probably what Carson means here. Are election results legitimate or worth anything if a big portion of the electorate doesn't vote? Well, if a big portion of the electorate doesn't vote, what you have is a system in which few people are deciding who are our elected officials or what ballot initiatives pass or not. So if there hasn't been rigging of votes, if there hasn't been voter suppression where people who tried to vote were not able to, either because of fabricated and trumped up, kind of weird to say trumped up in the concept.
Pun intended?
Yeah, pun not intended, but actually a pun. Unless you have those specific instances, if a lot of people just never cared to vote, it's still a legitimate election result. It is only worth as much as saying we have a representative democracy in which only a small portion of our electorate, of the potential electorate, is actually represented. I don't know that we can say that we want to go in the direction of mandatory voting. There are countries that have mandatory voting, and in some cases it works okay, in some cases it doesn't. And I actually completely respect the idea of not voting because you don't feel that your vote makes a difference, that in the end it's not going to change anything. I don't agree with it, but I respect that people have the right to do that. Now, like with Jason, who says often in national elections he doesn't vote, I would never say that shouldn't be your right, that you should be forced to vote. I would want to convince you that it actually does make sense to vote. And one of the best pieces of evidence we see is that from everywhere, from presidential elections all the way down ballot, when voter turnout is on balance lower, we see it easier or more likely that the more conservative candidate wins. So while, yes, you can always make the argument that me individually as a voter, I as a voter don't make a difference. Well, yeah, if you alone didn't vote, it might not change any particular outcome. But the idea that voting doesn't matter, I find to be crazy. I think it's embarrassing that voter turnouts are so low.
Yeah, so I will say that I have never voted in a presidential election.
Yep.
I have voted in many local elections for things that locally I felt very strongly about.
Yep.
But to elaborate on that, it's not that I don't feel that my vote doesn't count. I feel like it's very important to vote. And I feel that the people that feel strongly about a candidate should vote, especially even if they think they're voting kind of the whole, let's say, Yankees versus Red Sox example, you voting for the person that you don't want to win, or voting against the person you don't want to win makes a big difference. And I heard an interesting thing writing in this morning about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, of all people, actually in favor of people not voting, saying that if you aren't actually educated, you don't actually know what these politicians are standing for, you shouldn't vote. But
Yeah,
I don't agree with that wholeheartedly.
I knew he took that position. I tend not to agree with that. When someone says, look at all the people having kids, that really should be, there should really be a test for parenting. The problem is the application of that will disproportionately hurt poor and minority people. And then you're basically creating a system which is going to actually further lead to more of one race of kids being born than another. I think it's very, very dangerous, although I see people all the time who should not be having kids. The problem is in the application of a lot of these ideas. A test for voting. This is one of the main things, that if you are a citizen, you get to vote. And it is, while I completely understand the concept of, we have so many people who don't even understand the policies of the candidates. They maybe have never even heard. They're just voting a party line, or they're completely clueless. Believe me, I get it. I've spoken to them when we interview people. But voting is a right for citizens, period. And, unfortunately, there are times where you can lose that right, including through the commission of certain crimes. But I think that is very dangerous. And I think some of what Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has written is interesting. I couldn't disagree more with that.
Something else I found very interesting, I heard another podcast about how people who have guardians have to express that they want to vote in order to vote. And this is coming up in California because there's something like 30,000 people there with guardians. And they were similarly asking, should we test these people to test that they have the comprehensive abilities, the the ability to think and understand
Right.
to vote, that's a tough card to play.
I think it is very dangerous when we go in that direction. To finalize my answer to the question, yeah, elections are legitimate even when you might have 40% voter turnout. It just really sucks that more people are not getting engaged because it is not truly a representative result.